if you want to make a rabbi anxious, then wait till the middle of the Torah reading on Saturday morning, and just before you're about to read from the Torah, say, "Hey, Rabbi, I think there's something wrong with the Torah. I think there's a letter missing or broken." Because if a letter is missing or broken from the Torah, it is not kosher and it cannot be read from. So if the rabbi doesn't have 15 other Torah scrolls ready and rolled to the right place, it can create a lot of chaos. However, there's one exception to this rule about having no broken letters. There's one part in the Torah where there's actually supposed to be a broken letter, and it's the beginning of this week's parasha of Pinchas. So the background to the beginning of this week's parasha is, remember last week Balak, the king of the nation of Moab, went to the prophet, the non-Jewish prophet Bilam, and told him to curse the people. Fortunately, at the last minute, instead of a curse, a blessing came out of Bilam's mouth. However, Bilam and Balak did not give up trying to stop the Israelite nation, who they felt threatened by. So they came up with a much more nefarious plan, which was that they would convince the most beautiful of the women of Moab to commingle with the Israelite men and seduce them, both to relationships and ultimately leading to idolatry. And unfortunately, it was quite successful. And what happened was that God, rather than directly telling the people to stop, God wanted them to realize the destruction that their actions would take. So God released a plague on the people, thousands dying because of the evil actions, the misled actions of the Israelite men. Fortunately, there was one man, Pinchas, who was a Kohen, a priest, who was a direct descendant, of course, of Aharon and Elazar, his son. And he said, "No one's doing anything, I'm going to do something." So he saw one of the leaders of the Israelite, not just a regular Israelite, but a tribal leader, Zimri. And he saw that he was going into a tent with a Midianite woman, still a non-Jewish idolater, and he decided to take justice into his own hand, vigilante justice. So he took a spear, and right before the two of them were together, he killed both of them with that single spear. And immediately after that, the plague stopped. That was the end of last week's parasha. In the beginning of this week, as we look at the aftermath, and there's a lot of questions that we have to ask ourselves. Why was it that the killing of one person would end this entire plague? Perhaps it was because it scared everyone who would continue to do it, to thinking that Pinchas would go around and kill all of them. But that's also not consistent with the way that we approach the Torah and justice. When Hashem was ready to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah, Avram went to him and said, whoa, they deserve a fair trial. Give them a chance. Ultimately, they deserve to be destroyed, but not before a fair trial and a chance to talk it out. Even though God doesn't need witnesses because God knows everything, Avraham said everyone, even the most evil cities in the world, deserve a chance to be considered for mercy or for justice. Pinchas didn't take that opportunity here. So what happens? Does God censure him? Do the people censure him? So our parsha this week begins, V'deber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem speaking to Moshe to say, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, son of Aharon, HaKohen, Heshiv et Hamati me'al b'nei Yisrael bekan'o. That Pinchas, through his actions, he turned away the anger that Hashem had on his people. Even though Hashem doesn't really get angry, the appropriate response for God when they turn away from God would be jealousy and anger. And the consequences of their actions brought down jealousy and angry actions. Et kinati, and God's jealousy betocham, amongst them. Velo chiliti et bnei Yisrael bekinati, and Hashem says, I did not destroy them in my jealousy, because they were turning to other gods, and this was because of Pinchas's actions. So God seems to be, I don't know if pleased is the right word here, but if we look at the next line here, what God is going to reward Pinchas with. Lachen emor. So God says to Moshe, this is what I want you to say. And he doesn't say tell Pinchas, God just tells Moshe to say it. Hineni noten lo et briti shalom. Behold, I am giving to him my covenant, my brit, like a bris, like a brit milah of shalom. And that brings us to what we began with, is the broken vav. The word shalom, the letter shin, lamed, vav, and mem sofit, the final mem. But the vav in the Torah and the word shalom is cracked. And that's intentional. In most cases, a cracked letter makes a Torah scroll not kosher. And in this case, unless the vav is cracked, the Torah scroll is not kosher. It must be cracked. So what is it trying to tell us? Now, this tradition of the cracked letter is passed down from the Masoretes, from the word Masorah, the tradition. So these rabbis were trying to teach us something powerful by telling us that a Torah scroll is not kosher unless this vav is cracked. And what the rabbis are suggesting here, at least the first suggestion, is that while God ultimately recognizes that Pinchas's actions were required, ultimately, if he is to be a Kohen, a successful Kohen, he cannot go around as a vigilante and just killing everyone. So this is not a reward, rather, and nor is it a censure. Rather, it's an agreement going forward. A brit is a promise. The Israelites, Jews, we have a brit, a covenant where we promise to keep God's Torah and God will reward us. And here, Hashem says to Pinchas, you can be a Kohen forever and your family can continue to be Kohanim, but you have to promise with your brit, an extra mitzvah, as it were, for Pinchas, you're not going to go around killing people anymore. You have to focus on shalom. But there's something else beautiful here. There's a 20th century rabbi, brilliant rabbi, Shlomo Yosef Zevin, and he put together one of the most important works of modern Torah scholarship, the Encyclopedia Talmudit, and he also wrote a number of commentaries on the Torah, and he points out, or he suggests at least, that the broken vav might be telling us, ignore it. It's broken, it's there because it's part of the word shalom. That's the message that, those are the words that Hashem spoke to Moshe, but it's cracked because we should read it as if it wasn't there. And if you take out the word vav from shalom, you end up with the word shalem, which is complete. That is the shoresh, the root of the word shalom is completeness. And he further on suggests that the significant difference between shalom and shalem is that shalom, creating peace, is outward. I try and create peace in my whole community with everyone I meet. And that is the role of a Kohen. They talk about Aharon, the rabbis talk about that he would even trick people, deceive them slightly so that friendships would be mended for the greater good. But he was always focusing on outward shalom. But shalom is inward. Shalom is me trying to fix myself, me trying to recognize the brokenness within me and trying to resolve the issues that I carry with me. And the only way to create a true and lasting peace, shalom, and many rabbis have said this, is to be shalom, whole, inside. Think about how many truces or ceasefires there are in war where people look and say, oh, we're at peace now. But behind the scenes, there's really a war brewing. Think about the Cold War. Think about how many countless conflicts where people aren't actively in conflict with each other, but they have so many issues, they have so many conflicts that they haven't resolved. Internally, they are far from complete. So the shalom, the outward shalom, is brittle and can snap at any moment. So what God is saying, or what the rabbis are trying to teach us, is that there's always a tension between trying to outwardly make this place a better world, but also to recognize that we need to focus on ourselves and fix ourselves. And the only way for Pinchas to be able to be a successful Kohen and bring peace to the people through korbanot and all of the actions of the Kohen was to focus on himself in shalem. He tried to make peace for his community through a spear. But ultimately, that was a tenuous peace, because if we try and resolve all issues by stabbing people and killing people, ultimately peace won't last and there will only be chaos. And this leads to a final thought, which is that there's a tradition that when Moshe brought down the first Aseret HaDibrot, the first Luchot, the first tablets, and he smashed them, we don't know what happened to those pieces, those shattered pieces, but tradition tells us we didn't throw them away. Those broken pieces weren't thrown away. They were put in the Aron, the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron HaKodesh, the holy Aron, with the full pieces. And the reason for that, tradition teaches, is that we need to recognize our brokenness. We can't hide it away, sweep it under the rug, put it in the closet with our skeletons. We need to recognize our brokenness, because only when we recognize it and validate it and work on our brokenness, work on our issues, are we able to grow? Are we able to create peace and strong relationships? Somebody who is deeply damaged can't have a healthy relationship. And we need to find a balance between both of those things. We must carry our brokenness with us. And only then can we become shalem, complete, and only once we are complete internally can we start to build strong, true, peaceful relationships with the people around us. Pinchas got that message from God, and I hope that message can resonate with us as well. Shabbat Shalom.